Tonight, legal retaliation. Major General Dany Fortin names the Prime Minister in a $6 million lawsuit. Taking aim for his termination as head of Canada's vaccine rollout.
His reputation has been stained and sullied
After his acquittal on a sex assault charge. Ballooning banking fears dragging down global stock prices.
They just don't seem to be able to get anything right.
And the new read on Canadian real estate.
They're going to wait for April, May, June when there's something for them to buy.
Plus, the great vinyl revival.
I get some satisfaction knowing that I'm supporting the artist rather than streaming it.
Moving the needle on a record resurgence.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. A senior Canadian military commander trained for battle is gearing up for a new legal fight against the Prime Minister and 15 other high-ranking officials. Major General Dany Fortin is suing for $6 million after he was acquitted of sexual assault. But the charge triggered his removal as head of Canada's vaccine rollout. Fortin alleges the defendant's conduct was reprehensible, extreme, flagrant, and high-handed, and that even though he was exonerated by the CAF, it still refuses or has unreasonably delayed his reintegration. CTV's senior political correspondent Glenn McGregor starts us off tonight with the high-stakes showdown.
3 months ago, Major General Dany Fortin left court a free man, acquitted on a sexual assault charge that dated back to his time at a Quebec military college in 1988.
I did not do what I was accused of.
Now Fortin is returning to court to sue the federal government for what he alleges was a politically motivated investigation.
It has been an unmitigated disaster for General Fortin and for his family. His reputation has been stained and sullied despite the fact that, he's been acquitted of these charges.
His statement of claim names the Prime Minister, the former Defense Minister, and the current Chief of Defense Staff, along with 13 other defendants. In November 2020, Fortin was seconded from the military to the Public Health Agency of Canada to coordinate the distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. He was removed from the job 6 months later after a complainant came forward. At the time, Canada's military was reeling from repeated allegations of sexual misconduct in its ranks. Fortin alleges the government jumped the gun by announcing he was under investigation before any charges were laid. A statement from then Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan, Fortin claims, was defamatory, written for furthering his personal political career, his personal political goals, and his government's political objectives. Military prosecutors, Fortin and his lawyer claim, conducted a rushed and cursory investigation that was tainted by considerations of political expediency. The die was cast before the investigation was fully and competently completed. The case was referred to civilian prosecutors in Quebec. After trial, the judge said she wasn't satisfied that Fortin was the alleged assailant.
I am so relieved.
Despite the acquittal, Fortin claims his reintegration into the Canadian Forces has been unreasonably delayed. Fortin is seeking $6 million in damages. The government is not commenting and has not yet filed a defense. None of the allegations, Omar, has been proven in court.
All right, Glenn, thank you. And there was a volley of unproven allegations today from both the U.S. and Russia as the two superpowers pointed the finger at each other for the downing of an American drone over the Black Sea. The U.S. says its surveillance aircraft was struck by a Russian warplane, but the Kremlin denies it. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malvin on the tensions.
The American surveillance drone was flying in international airspace over the Black Sea when Russian fighter jets flew in front of the unmanned drone, dumping fuel in its path before clipping the propeller, causing it to crash.
We know that the intercept was intentional. We know that the aggressive behavior was intentional. We also know it was very unprofessional and very unsafe.
What America's top general can't say, did Russia intentionally down the drone? Was this an act of war? It's the closest the two countries have come into direct conflict since Russia invaded Ukraine. And aerial harassment, says the U.S., like this incident in 2020, is getting worse.
This hazardous episode is part of a pattern of aggressive, risky, and unsafe actions by Russian pilots in international airspace.
The Kremlin claims that airspace over the Black Sea is theirs, off limits to aerial traffic during the Ukraine conflict. The U.S. flatly rejects that. But this latest showdown in the skies is proof, says the Kremlin, that America is directly involved in the war. Russia vows to recover the downed drone, but the White House is confident they won't get much, claiming to erase any sensitive software technology before the drone plunged into the water.
Should anything be taken by the Russians, their ability to exploit useful intelligence will be highly minimized. That said, it's our property.
America's top generals spoke to their Russian counterparts. Their message to Moscow: the U.S. won't be intimidated and will continue to operate in international airspace. Omar?
All right, Joy, thanks. Mounting apprehension over the global financial sector is spreading, with word another bank has run into trouble, this time in Europe. Shares in Swiss lender Credit Suisse plunged 30% at one point today. North American markets also took a dive. As CTV's Kevin Gallagher reports, it's fanning new fears.
Share values in Switzerland's second largest bank plummeted to all-time lows today, as embattled Credit Suisse learned its largest investor won't offer a financial lifeline.
We now own 9.8% of the bank. If we go above 10%, all kinds of new rules kick in.
First European, then global markets tumbled over fears the large lender with $574 billion in assets could share a similar fate to failed Silicon Valley and Signature banks in the U.S., prompting the Swiss Central Bank to promise to keep it afloat if necessary.
The fright factor, the scare factor, is, I think, what's really driving kind of the concerns right now in stock markets globally.
Credit Suisse has faced scandals in the past, including a conviction last year for failing to prevent money laundering by a drug trafficking gang.
They just don't seem to be able to get anything right. And that's as a result of, years and years of poor management.
European regulators say new rules brought in after the 2008 financial crisis should help contain the damage, something that shelters the Swiss bank from recent American failures, according to its top executive.
We are following materially different and higher standards when it comes to capital funding, liquidity, and so on.
Still, the Swiss shockwaves were felt on the Toronto Stock Exchange as well, with fears of a recession driving oil prices down to $68 a barrel, the lowest since December 2021. The market turmoil has economists calling on central banks to pause aggressive rate hikes, Omar, in hopes it will calm the financial system.
All right, Kevin, thank you. And realtors are hoping those pauses stimulate the spring housing market after new data from across the country shows a major slump. Sales dropped 40% in February compared to the same time last year. Here's CTV's BC Bureau Chief Melanie Nagy with more and the impact on the rental market.
In a BC neighborhood, these 3 homes have been sitting on the market for months. Each comes with a $10.5 million price tag, a hefty sum considering Canada's sluggish housing sales.
We all know what the market looked like a year ago, and that's long gone.
Sean Cathcart is an economist with the Canadian Real Estate Association, which says sales have dropped, with the number of newly listed properties down 7.9% from January. But even with the decline, there are signs of improvement. From January to February this year, there was an increase of 2.3%, and it was driven by sales in Vancouver and Greater Toronto.
Which was the biggest increase we've seen on a month-to-month basis since sales started falling a year ago.
A major factor impacting the market: interest rates. While the Bank of Canada paused further hikes last week, experts say current rates are still too high for some people.
So we've seen over the past year a tremendous decline in ownership demand.
Another issue is the lack of housing supply. In addition to sellers not listing, there hasn't been a boom in new builds.
It's hard to find workers to increase the pace of construction. And material costs are high, so the economics of new construction is challenging.
That supply shortage has forced many people to remain in the rental market, which is also costly. Recently, there's been protests in Vancouver, which has some of the most expensive rents in North America. With a 1-bedroom costing more than $2,000 a month, Rebecca Love is struggling to find a place to live.
Hopefully we can find a new place in the neighborhood, but like I said, those are slim to none.
As for how much it costs to buy a home, the national average price in February was just over $660,000. Melanie Nagy, CTV News, Vancouver.
The Canadian Transportation Agency has issued fines to the country's major airlines for hundreds of violations related to flight delays and cancellations. Sunwing got the biggest fine, $126,000 for not keeping passengers updated during December's flight delays. And in another development related to Flair, the airline is suing several leasing companies for $50 million for seizing 4 of their planes last weekend after Flair failed to pay them. And rail giant Canadian Pacific is on track to becoming the first railroad connecting Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. American regulators have cleared the final hurdle for CP's bid to buy Kansas City Southern Railways for almost $43 billion Canadian. The combined network will be called Canadian Pacific Kansas City, cover more than 32,000 kilometers, and employ nearly 20,000 people. The takeover could come into effect as early as April 14th. The company's headquarters will remain in Calgary. The Prime Minister confirmed today former Governor General David Johnston will be the new Special Rapporteur on Foreign Interference. Johnston, who was also a law professor for 45 years, will look into allegations that China meddled in Canada's last 2 federal elections and then recommend whether or not the Liberal government should proceed with a public inquiry, which the opposition insists should happen immediately. This comes as warnings from Chinese dissidents about Beijing's influence grow louder. Here's CTV's Judy Trinh.
We're not identifying this man. The Chinese Communist Party may be watching his every move.
They showed my relatives a photo of me eating at a restaurant, another photo walking with my children at a park.
We're calling him Chan. After Xi Jinping came to power, he clamped down on religious groups. Chan, a Catholic, started to protest for religious freedom in China. More than 5 years ago, he sought political asylum in Canada. His family back home is now paying the price.
My relative was fired from his government job. My wife's parents were thrown in jail for half a year. When they were released, they disowned us.
Sheng Shui understands that pain. 27 years ago, soldiers arrested her at the Beijing airport, preventing her from seeing her mother. Shui was flagged because she was speaking out in Canada about the Tiananmen Square massacre.
They came out from the square, and some people, they have blood on their shirts. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is a war.
For daring to dissent, Shui was targeted in a campaign of harassment that lasted years. On Chinese social media, fake escort ads with her phone number were shared thousands of times. A man demonstrated for 5 months on Parliament Hill, calling her a spy. Then he sued her for $10 million, accusing Shui of murder and kidnapping. She reported all of this, but no action was taken. Shui hopes that will now change.
I think Canadians are right to be extremely concerned about the interference by China.
I don't want Canada to be part of the Chinese Communist regime.
The government, under pressure, has announced a slew of measures, naming a special rapporteur, consulting on a foreign agent registry, and RCMP have been alerted to at least 6 Chinese police stations across Canada. But Omar, there may be more.
All right, Judy Trinh in Toronto tonight. Judy, thank you. Hundreds of families in Malawi held funerals for their loved ones lost to Tropical Cyclone Freddie. The country's president is calling for international support and declared 14 days of national mourning. The death toll has risen to more than 270 since the powerful storm made landfall last month in 3 African countries, including Mozambique and Madagascar. Raging floodwaters in southeastern Turkey swept away cars and inundated homes. Some people had to scramble up ladders to safety. At least 14 people have been killed. It's the same region that was hit by last month's devastating earthquakes that killed 48,000 people. And this is the damage from Cyclone Yaku in Peru, which pounded towns with torrential rain. No fatalities have been reported, but more intense rainfall is expected until Friday. Coming up after the break.
Who are you looking for?
A chilling conversation with police after a cold-blooded killing. Plus, moon suit makeover, a new look for a lunar mission. UK police have released dramatic body cam footage of a man serving a life sentence for stabbing his ex-lover's new partner to death last July. The video was taken after the crime, the killer visibly drunk.
What's your name?
I'm not gonna tell you my name. I don't give a because I know what happened. And you need me to know, figure it out what happened. If you don't have me, you don't know what happened. You're gonna think about me, but it's not gonna be me because there's no proof.
So you think something's happened to a male in this address?
No, I know what happened.
What
I know
happened then?
everything.
Tell me
I know
what
everything.
happened.
This city is mine. I'm not gonna
This
tell you
city's
what
yours, is it?
Yeah, this city is mine.
Can you get in the van, please?
Merrick Hecko was arrested, charged 3 days later, and later convicted. Honda is recalling nearly 500,000 vehicles south of the border and 52,000 right here in Canada because of latching issues with its front seat belts, potentially causing a jam with the release button. The recall includes certain CRVs, Accords, Odyssey vans, and Acura RDXs. Owners who are affected will be notified mid-April. Safety will meet high fashion on NASA's next mission to the moon, with the space agency ditching bulky spacesuits for sleeker gear. This is what the latest lunar wear will look like, except the black will be white to reflect heat. In 2025, NASA plans to take astronauts, including a Canadian, to the moon, marking humanity's first return to the lunar surface in more than 50 years. Still ahead, counting his lucky stars again.
My heart quit twice, and they brought me around.
An Alberta man's unlikely connection to the air ambulance service that saved his life. Tonight, an Alberta man's love for the lotto is making him count his stars not once, but twice. CTV's Stephanie Thomas on the $1 million win and a life-saving liftoff.
You never know when you're going to need them, and I'm proof of it.
Neil Lunn went to the nearby Didsbury Emergency Department for serious heart problems in January. His doctor called in the Stars Air Ambulance Service to take him to the Foothills Hospital for a cardiac arrest. Mid-flight, the medical crew worked to save his life.
I guess when they landed at Foothills Hospital, my heart quit twice, and they brought me around. So everything fell in line perfectly.
During a moment of calm during the helicopter ride, he told the Stars paramedic he couldn't believe the situation. Just 9 years earlier, he and his wife won a $1.3 million home in Calgary.
You know, little did he know he'd win the dream home, and even less did he know he'd be a patient through the organization that he's been supporting for so long. So just, yeah, it's kind of full circle, surreal moment.
He says funds raised by the Stars lottery covers the cost to run a single base for an entire year. Even after winning the grand prize, the couple continued to buy Stars lottery tickets to help keep the helicopter service in the air and in case of an emergency.
And like I said, if it wasn't for Stars, he wouldn't be here.
The couple decided not to uproot to Calgary, but hope to visit the Stars base in the city to thank the crew for their life-saving work.
I'll keep supporting them as long as I'm here.
The 80-year-old now has a pacemaker implanted in his heart and says he's recovering well. Stephanie Thomas, CTV News, Didsbury, Alberta.
And before we go to break, we want to take a moment to remember Bobby Caldwell, the soulful R&B singer whose voice and musical style was adored by generations, has died at the age of 71.
What you won't do for love. You've tried.
Caldwell is best known for his 1978 mega hit, What You Won't Do for Love. The Smooth Soul Jam climbed to number 9 on the Billboard Top 100 and was covered by artists like Boyz II Men and Michael Bolton. Caldwell got his professional break playing guitar in Little Richard's band before going solo.
Make me do for love what I would not do.
Beautiful voice. After the break.
It's really nice to see a lot of people coming back to it or getting into it for the first time.
The return of the record and its rise in popularity. We leave you tonight with one for the record books. A blast from the past is making waves on the music scene south of the border. CTV's Chris Adjugate with more on the vintage revolution.
Where the compact disc once reigned supreme in physical sales.
This is the wall.
Oh, how the tables have turned for vinyl.
Always been a fan of physical media, especially vinyl. It's really nice to see a lot of people coming back to it.
Vinyl sales have grown for 7 consecutive years in the U.S., reaching a record high of $15.9 billion. And now, for the first time since 1987, vinyl is seeing a record revival, outselling compact discs, with 41 million records sold last year, compared to 33 million CDs.
I definitely think people wanted to get into something new or get into a new collection, something they could, spend their money on and really enjoy.
While streaming music still makes up 84% of sales, music enthusiasts say you can't beat that unique sound quality.
I think it's sort of a way for people to engage with their favorite artists. Also, it's a part of someone's identity.
I have a really wide clientele of super young kids getting into it and, older people getting back into it, so it's just like coming together.
Artists are making less than a penny per stream, but thanks to this vinyl resurgence from new and older artists, experts say record sales will only go up, translating to more fan support.
They're adding different songs that are only available and exclusive on vinyl records. In fact, Taylor Swift's album Midnight basically sold more copies than the Beatles and Fleetwood Mac put together.
I mean, this is like my favorite album of all time.
Proving that out with the old and in with the new isn't always sound advice. Chris Adjugate, CTV News, Halifax.
And that is a snapshot of this Wednesday for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching and good night.
Five crucial questions to expose the truth. Who's at risk? What needs to change? When will justice be done?
There was actually a plot to kill you.
Where's the proof? Why did this happen? Watch W5 Saturdays at 7 on CTV.